at this little guy. Look at this weird little guy. He's part backpack. The plane of Lorwyn-Shadowmoor is full of weird little guys. It's what we love about the place. And so after 2 decades-ish, don't worry about that part, it's nice to be back in a place with all our weird little guys. But I mean, how weird are they, really? Or I guess the question that I'm more interested in is, how normal are they? How normal is Lorwyn-Shadowmoor? Lorwyn/Shadowmoor. I don't know how it's supposed to be formatted. The point is it normal to be Lorwyn/Shadowmoor? Maybe. This is a question that nobody is asking, but I'm asking it, so here we are. But what do I mean by a set being normal? Well, there is a set design for set design. They are of a certain size. If they're standard, ordinary sets, they have certain effects, certain distributions, and the further you go away from that, the weirder a set starts to feel. So with the set fully released, I thought I would look at all these weird little guys and see that maybe they're just perfectly normal under the goo. Now, this is the sort of thing that could just turn into a rambling vibe check, but let's try to be a little more analytical about this. So we're going to break down a set's normalness, by 3 different measures. There is the structure of the set, how much it looks and feels and boxes up like a Magic the Gathering standard set. Second, the mechanics. Are we doing weird stuff? Or is this we've been here before kind of mechanics? And lastly, and most importantly, for the aesthetic among us, the vibes. We'll tackle these in reverse to be more to less subjective, because there are spreadsheets. Oh, there are spreadsheets. But before I go much further, disclaimers. First, normal does not mean good. Weird does not mean bad. This is not a value judgment. This is a description of deviation from the mean. That's basically it. You know, if Magic the Gathering had always been about the weird, goopy little guys, then it would be very weird to introduce human man. And even weirder to introduce actual human man. So, since this is all about variance, we need the baseline to be variancing from. That's not how words work, but that's what I said. For a bunch of structural and mechanical reasons, we'll stick to 2024 and 2025 sets. That's it. That's still a lot, but we can narrow it down to sets like Lorwyn Eclipsed. So standard legal, standard size, new cards mostly, and cut out things like Fallout, Commander only, Assassin's Creed, small set, Spider-Man, small set. We'll also cut out Innistrad Remastered, Ravnica Remastered, they're reprint sets. Foundation's kind of the same, it's a core set, so like it's got some new stuff, but it's a lot of it's a little fuzzy. And Modern Horizons happened. We'll leave ourselves with 9 existing sets. Ta-da! Where does Lorwyn Eclipsed fit in the normalcy rank? We'll start with the vibes. This is easily the most subjective part of this whole exercise. You are going to disagree with me, probably, and that's fine. The first step of this is determining what is normal vibe. What is, for Magic the Gathering, the most normal of sets? I, of course, would have my opinions on the matter. Other people would have their opinions. So I asked them. I just went around online and in-person Magic communities and asked them, unprompted and without further explanation, what's the most normal set of Magic the Gathering to you? A lot of answers around Ravnica in particular, a lot of core sets, folks mentioning those specifically because they're kind of all over the place. It's a little bit of everything, and that feels average. But Ravnica has that Central European, Eastern European feel. Something about it screams normal, I guess. I personally would have said Dominaria. That's where a lot of the game comes from historically. And it borrows on that European medieval tradition that you think of when you think high fantasy. So that became sort of the barometer. Something that is a little placeless, but if it has a place, it's really European. Mostly medieval, maybe some future tech, because, you know, we're not doing pure high fantasy, we're having some fun with it. Neon Dynasty is not normal. It's fun, but it's weird. Again, normal is not a value judgment. So it might make sense with a number of answers saying that Ravnica is very normal, that the set based in Ravnica would be very normal. I think there's a lot to be said about the intensity of the flavor of the set. The umami of a set. What I mean is, you can have a set that is in that cyberpunk kind of aesthetic, but is ultimately still about knights and goblins and all of those high fantasy elements. Or you can go full cyberpunk 2077, where you have vending machines and Keanu Reeves. I haven't played the game. Everything I know about Cyberpunk 2077 I learned from an N.E. Austin video. I won't go into an entire breakdown of my tier list. That's unnecessary, but for a sense of where I'm coming from on this particular point, the winner for the most normal Magic the Gathering set of the last 2 years is Bloomborough. After all, it is a set all about valiant knights saving medieval villages from equivalent of dragons, and also there's a dragon. The fact that they're all little anthropomorphic animals, to me, doesn't even register as all that weird. When you have traditions like Renard in folklore and fantasy throughout history and throughout the world, essentially. It's not even just a European thing. That happens all over the place. But it is pretty tight at the top. I mean, Tarkir Dragonstorm is also fairly normal, and honestly, if it wasn't directly tied to a notable media property, if you just did Avatar: The Last Airbender as a plane, it would feel kind of normal. Honestly, the bottom end of the scale was harder to decide. What's weirder, Wacky Races or Gunsmoke? Relative to, Robin Hood. But overall, with Lorwyn-Shadowmoor being heavily influenced by Celtic mythology and leaning into that influence, we're not too far off from the sorts of influences that drive the normal sets. So it's honestly a pretty normal vibe. I'm not weirded out by the goo. But that's all subjective. And there are spreadsheets, and I bring numbers. And I'm not going to rattle off all those numbers, because it's a lot of numbers. But we can use some of those numbers to discuss how normal, mechanically, any of these sets are. So again, what's normal on a mechanical scale? Well, each new Magic the Gathering set introduces new mechanics. They just keep coming, and they don't stop coming. But over the 30 plus odd years of the game, there have been a lot of mechanics that kind of feel like other mechanics. We were describing waterbending as convoke plus improvise plus just pay mana. Station is crewing, kind of. The more the mechanics of a set just look and feel like little tweaks on other mechanics, the more I consider that set to be normal. We're still in Vibes Town, people. There's also the question of complexity. How difficult are these mechanics to understand? How many things do they introduce? How many of them are there? Lorwyn Eclipsed doesn't have a lot of new mechanics. There's Blight and there's Vivid, and that's it. The set is a little weird just on that front. The fact that it introduces so little that's new. Not complaining, but it's odd. After all, these 9 sets, on average, introduce 3 or 4 new mechanics, leaning towards 4. And some of them are really complicated, Some of them are easy to conflate with something else. Disguise and cloak both do the same thing, but not really, but yeah. So this was another vibes-ish sort of thing, but informed vibes, smart vibes. I felt like Aetherdrift deserves to fall at the weirdest on this list because it introduced game state. You now have the concept of speed. Magic doesn't do this very often, for the better. I like the initiative, it's fun sometimes, it is more things to keep track of. And then there was Daybound Nightbound, and everyone hated that. So a set that introduces a new zone, or a new concept, or a new application of a zone, that feels more weird. I find that the most normal mechanics are the ones that really just look like something else, like how Job Select just looks like for Mirrodin or Living Weapon. Or there are mechanics that actually work out pretty obviously. They don't add rules complexity, at least not to the average player. There is complexity with saga creatures, sure, but it's a saga that you could punch someone with. Of course, Final Fantasy wound up being, to me, the most normal mechanically. Little light on new mechanics, but what it has are just simple iterations on what came before. And Blighting is a pretty simple iteration on what's come before. Vivid basically came before. We've done this, but ultimately I put Lorwyn Eclipsed kind of in the middle because Blight doesn't appear as much as you might think for a major mechanic. Neither does Vivid, really, and that's it. It's those two. You can say -1/-1 counters are a major mechanic, a major theme of the set. They're not new. Didn't count them in this analysis. Again, vibes, but numerical vibes. What do you say we cut out the vibes? A set of Magic the Gathering consists of 261 cards, not counting basic lands or other lands that go in the land slot. Now, I wouldn't blame you for being hard-pressed to find any set where there are exactly 266 different cards that show up in the draft boosters, because there aren't. And yet, 261 is the number. And in the Play Booster era, I told you this would be relevant, there are 81 commons, 100 uncommons, 60 rares, and 20 mythics. That's it. Those exact consistent numbers are the size of a standard set of Magic the Gathering. Final Fantasy is too big. But even as I say that, there have been so many deviations in the last 2 years. Avatar is not as big as it might seem. It's still too big. It has 10 extra uncommons. But we can safely say that every in-universe set since the Play Booster era began has had 261 non-basic cards in those boosters, except Murders at Karlov Manor didn't do that. Surveil Lands. And Lorwyn Eclipsed didn't do that. There's just extra rares. The count was perfectly fine, and then Oko had it's more than Oko's fault, but like it's Oko's. We're gonna blame Oko. Blame Oko. Funny enough, Lorwyn Eclipsed is actually really heavy on creatures. By creatures, I do mean cards that, when you play it down, it is a creature, end of story. And yeah, Final Fantasy had more creatures. We all knew that. We all felt that. We can even look at how many commons of each color are there in this set. The design skeleton has an opinion on this. There's a design skeleton. There's a way you're supposed to make a Magic the Gathering set. Murders at Karlov Manor was the first set to use this skeleton, and no surprise, it deviates from it like everything else. Lorwyn Eclipsed is following a trend that appears to have come up over the last few sets, where the single color commons and uncommons, the count's a little different than it used to be. We have hybrid multicolor commons. We have hybrid multicolor uncommons, more and more. Not always, like Final Fantasy didn't have any. And of the 10 sets that we're looking at, half of them don't do hybrid mana. It's the sort of thing that's weird until it isn't. That's how weird works. But Lorwyn has like a lot of hybrid mana, like a lot. But if we break down a few key elements of a set's structure, Lorwyn Eclipsed doesn't actually have the biggest deviation from the mean in most things. It's just hybrid mana that it uses so much of, and it's a little low on signposts, gold signpost cards, those uncommons that when you're drafting are the signals for here's how you should be drafting. Have fun with that. And we could say this is because, well, the Eclipsed cycle is kind of signposts. It's a typal set, which is a little weird, but they do them a bunch. Overall though, Lorwyn Eclipsed doesn't have large deviations from the mean in these categories. Some of that is Final Fantasy's fault. It introduced some big swings, but all in all, it's a set that is a little weird, but not the weirdest. In these aspects, how else can we analyze the structure of a set? Well, there are a bunch of keywords. You know, you got your stuff with flying, vigilance, first strike, double strike, haste, lifelink, ward, menace, trample, reach, death touch, indestructible, prowess. We could go on. So I did. I went through all 10 of these sets and looked at how frequently any given keyword of this list, and for each one, I looked at how many times at that color, at that rarity, you can put down a creature and just have the thing. You don't have to do anything else. If I can just pay 3 mana and get a white uncommon with vigilance, that counts. If it's on a vehicle, it doesn't count. Not surprisingly, Aether Drift and Edge of Eternities kinda skewed this one. This is another element that the design skeleton emphasizes. How often do keywords appear in different colors and at different rarities? You don't want a set to be too heavy on any ability. I will throw one additional caveat, which is that I counted cards where you could exhaust it to give it an ability, if all you have to do is pay mana. War Balloon is a flyer. It's a 6 mana flyer that you can pay in installments, okay? Even with math, there are vibes. But there are also standard deviations. There is a delta. There is a ranking of which sets use keywords most normally. If you feel like we've lost the plot, yeah, Thunder Junction was 2 years ago. All in all, there is still a little bit of weighting and interpretation, shall we say, on these values, but this gives us a better framing for what set was structurally the most in line with what the Magic design skeleton wants it to be. And I'm going to declare Duskmourn the winner there. The campy 80s horror setup is underneath the surface just a normal set. Murders at Karlov Manor ends up taking second place. I didn't count creature types in any of this mechanical stuff. I know that it was heavily detective typal. Avatar is heavily ally typal. When I did try to weigh that in, honestly, it didn't influence things very much. At least not enough for me to care. You might care differently. You may have opinions. This is allowed. But ultimately, that heavier reliance on hybrid mana, the high quantity of creatures, and a keyword distribution that was a little outside the mean, but not as far as other sets wind up getting, because they have reasons to get further outside of it. I wound up putting Lorwyn Eclipsed at number 6, from most to least normal. So there you go. How normal is Lorwyn Eclipsed? Well, on the vibes, it's pretty normal. If you rank Universes Beyond as really weird, it'll go up even higher. But I'm looking at the next year and saying that barely counts anymore. So even in that context, it's only a little weird. The quantity of the mechanics is more weird than their actual nature. Blighting is pretty straightforward. Vivid is pretty straightforward. They appear a pretty straightforward amount. neutral normal. And then when you get to structure, it's clear that Wizards is experimenting a little bit on these weird little guys. Or with these weird, I would rather say on these weird little guys, now that I'm saying it out loud. The structure of the set is, in a few ways, a deviation from the skeleton and from the plans and patterns that they've demonstrated over the last 2 years. Things evolve. It is not a big surprise that 2 years on in a new design skeleton, it has changed somewhat. It's possible it's changed even more internally, and we don't know about it because I don't work there. I'm recording a YouTube video in my basement. So all of that comes together to make a set that's on the weird side. Not the weirdest thing they could do, but on the weird side. And if you want, you can average all of this out together, and Lorwyn Eclipsed becomes the standard bearer for middle-of-the-road weirdness in Magic the Gathering. If you're more normal than Lorwyn, you're normal. If you're weirder than Lorwyn, you're weird. I don't think we learned anything today.